365 Radio. It's time for our weekly segment with Max Olson of The Athletic. Brought to you by Pioneer Steel and Pipe, where customer service is their main focus, and best in metal, steel, and pipe for large or small projects, with 2 locations in Waco and Bryan. Family owned and operated since 1943.
Sam Johnson has time. Here comes the pressure. Lets it go. It is caught. Jermaine Jenkins. 28-yard strike.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Max Olson, theathletic.com national writer, covers college football, wrote an article about former Nebraska and now current Kansas State quarterback Adrian Martinez, and he joins us now on 365 Sports. Max, great stuff on Adrian Martinez, and man, this kid played with obviously a tremendous amount of pressure, and now we knew he was hurt. How hurt was he?
Yeah, did you read that piece, Smokey? Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I did. I really frustrated the hell out of me at times, but also I love the kid. I really do. I said hi to him at the Big 12 Media Days.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing it up, and appreciate you guys having me on as always. I think Adrian Martinez, obviously Nebraska fans who've watched him closely know that it's a pretty complicated 4-year run there, but, wanted to write this piece for the Big 12 audience, the K-State audience, national college football fans who, maybe you only know Adrian Martinez for the close losses and the turnovers and all the mistakes and injuries and stuff like that. But this is a guy that, you ask anybody that coached him and played with him, this is a tough SOB. I mean, this kid is just a tremendous leader, super mature kid. He gave everything he possibly could for Nebraska football. Obviously, the record, during his time there, 15-29 is brutal. But, it was not for lack of trying on Adrian Martinez's part. And last season, to play with a broken jaw for 6 games, which I asked Chris Kleiman, you ever had a guy do that before? He said he'd never heard of that before. Adrian Martinez did that for 6 games. He played with an ankle injury. He had a torn labrum at the end of the season. Like, this kid went through it all, took a ton of hits there, had to run the ball, be their whole run game for 3 years. Like, it's just a remarkable when you really kind of, unpack all of it, just the impact he had at Nebraska, obviously beyond wins and losses there. Heck of a player who I think is in a much better situation now at Kansas State.
I just think it's a better coaching match, don't you, Max? Not to knock Scott Frost, it's just
right.
Just as far as what Chris Kleiman will ask out of Adrian Martinez based on what Scott Frost needed from Adrian Martinez.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think a big factor in all this. And Adrian had poor decision making, obviously at times. When you end up with 48 turnovers, a lot of that's on you. But, he didn't really have the support, the help he needed around him, whether it was Nebraska's run game, which 94 rushing yards per game from your running backs over a 3-year span is just not anywhere near good enough to be an effective quarterback. O-line issues last year, lots of receivers heading the portal. Yeah, I think you're right that K-State's probably a better situation in a bunch of ways where he can hand it off to Deuce Vaughn, and we all, know and love watching Deuce Vaughn play. I think that he takes a ton of pressure off his quarterback, as we saw with Skylar Thompson. And, I think K-State's got good pieces around them. They need to kind of figure out the interior O-line there, but they've got a lot of good players returning. And I think that taking some of that pressure off Adrian Martinez to be the guy that's making the plays on 2nd and long and 3rd and long all the time, and then ultimately make mistakes, I think it's a big difference for him. And I know he's excited about it because he wants to go out and prove he can be that guy like Skylar Thompson. They can go, execute a balanced offense and get to the NFL.
Max, do you think that they've had their cover blown, so to speak, as a dark horse candidate? Because I feel like everybody's named them as a dark horse at this point, that they can't be considered a dark horse.
No, I know you're right. I don't know if that's just kind of people all kind of coming to those conclusions here in August as you try and stare at the standings and figure out who's going to surprise people. But yeah, you're right. They're not the dark horse anymore for sure. I think they have a chance if Adrian Martinez is really good, and that's the thing that's been missing in his career is just, can you be really good for a whole month or for 12 games and be consistent? That's the thing we just haven't really seen from him yet. They got to keep him healthy, but he's really kind of the X factor in that. And I think they've got a pretty good team around him where, they were pretty up and down last year. You guys saw him. there were streaks when they won a few in a row, streaks when they lost a few in a row. Offensively, pretty slow. They weren't great. They still won 8 games last year. So I think, and that's in year 3 with Kleiman. I think they've figured some stuff out there, and certainly they've been shooting for a Big 12 title the whole time there with their championship history at North Dakota State. I think this is the first year where they probably feel like they've got the pieces they need to actually be in the race in November.
Back to Martinez and Klein and the recruiting part of this. Klein was on a recruiting trip in Kansas City, heard that Martinez was in the transfer portal, drove to Lincoln. Can you try to describe what he said to you was in that restaurant when Martinez walked in the door with the Nebraska fans around?
Yeah, so Adrian Martinez goes in the portal on a Thursday morning, and Colin Klein gets the call, and it's about a 2.5-hour drive to Lincoln from or a 3-hour drive from where he was in Kansas City. And he just hit the road right away. They instantly knew this is the guy they wanted to pursue. And he asked Adrian, all right, where should I meet you? Because, you can do these in-person meetings as soon as they're in the portal. And Adrian says, meet me at Hopcat, which is this downtown restaurant here, pretty close to campus. Adrian walks in there. He's got a sling on his arm from a labrum surgery. And he's a guy that, sort of is easy to pick out in the crowd with that and just with his history in Nebraska. And the fans there actually saw him, and a few of them actually stood up and applauded him and thanked him for his 4 years at Nebraska. He signed a couple autographs for kids. Like, it's funny these recruitments are so they're so fascinating. I mean, usually you think they kind of happen behind closed doors, and you'd have them at your apartment, or you go visit their campus or whatever. And he's meeting them out in public. He even did it the next day with the Big Ten offensive coordinator. He didn't mind, meeting the guy in public for dinner. And I know that was a really important meeting for Colin Klein to kind of talk through Adrian's career at Nebraska and understand that, what he told me was when you really kind of talk it through with him and understand what he went through, sometimes in this sport, there's just some really good players that are in tough situations. And that's why we have, that's why the portal, I think, helps a lot of these guys to kind of get in a better situation where they can really show what they can do.
How important is it for Nebraska to win in Dublin, not only win the game, but win the way that they want to and not like the Keystone Cops accidentally winning?
If they lose this game, then I think it's a pretty slippery slope from here. I mean, not to put too much on one game, but I think the consensus around town and just around people that cover the program is they think Nebraska's going to win. They think Nebraska's potentially going to win big. I mean, you remember Nebraska blew out Northwestern last year, like 56-7 or whatever at home. So if Nebraska were to blow it in this one, like they did last year in the opener against Illinois, I think that this thing snowballs a bit just in terms of the negativity and the skepticism that, they're actually going to be better and that they're actually going to pull off a winning season here. The Northwestern is a team you just shouldn't sleep on. They weren't very good last year. They didn't really have a quarterback. They had a bunch of issues, but you would think they're going to be better and going to be ready for this game. And, there's been all this hype for 9 months about Casey Thompson and the Mark Whipple offense and O'Shawn Mathis and all these pieces that Nebraska's added, but it's all got to come together here because they really, just for morale and everything, they really need this one by any margin. They need to survive this game and get off to a good start.
Max, elsewhere, The Athletic had a piece that you were a part of predicting the number 4 spot in the college football playoff, and you made the case for Oklahoma. And for those who haven't read it, it's like the why or why not. And you laid it all out there. Are they one of the more interesting teams, I think, for kind of everybody in the country to see one way or the other? Because people just assume, like, they have to be worse. Like, there's no way they can keep this up. And yet at the same time, like, there's all sorts of reasons. They're Oklahoma. There's absolutely reasons why they can't. I mean, they just seem like one of the more fascinating question marks for college football heading into this season.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, we did that because when you look at the way the AP poll turned out, this preseason poll, you could tell voters had a really hard time kind of knowing what to do with Clemson, Michigan, Notre Dame, A&M, kind of Utah. Like, who's the real, like, front runner here if you're talking about that number 4 spot in the rankings? And I think you can throw Baylor in that conversation too, because I think it's pretty wide open. I'm not sure, especially with the quarterback issue that Clemson has, like, I'm not sure there's a team that is just on that kind of dominant level of Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, just in terms of the returning talent and star power and all that. Oklahoma is just one of the great wild cards of this season because I think the ceiling's really high. I mean, like, ideally on paper, you look at them and say, okay, well, why can't they have a top 10 scoring offense with Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Lebby and the pieces they have back, yeah, you lose Kennedy Brooks and you lose, Mario Williams and Hazelwood and a lot of playmakers there. But, I like what they've got with Marvin Mims and Eric Gray and the players they added via the portal. And I think they're going to be fine offensively. I think they'll put up a lot of points. And it's Brent Venables on defense, right? Like you figure, does he have all the pieces he wants this year? Probably not. But you think probably he'll take his best 11, whatever that looks like, and he'll have them really well coached and schemed up to be a problem in the Big 12. So like in an ideal world, like where they're healthy, don't have depth issues, whatever. Yeah, Oklahoma can win the Big 12 for sure and compete for a playoff spot. But they don't have that backup quarterback that they did last year. They don't have maybe that depth that you're used to seeing just because all of the attrition and all the seniors they lost off last year's team. So, you could go through some of that stuff where you can go through some issues here where you have some tough tests early on. If they lose a few games, yeah, like you kind of write it off as a year one thing where they're kind of working through some stuff. But it's going to just be fascinating to see. Can Brent Venables kind of put it all together there with what he's got? Obviously, they're recruiting at a high level. They're going to sustain success there. But yeah, year one maybe just not quite as guaranteed in terms of a super high floor like you usually see with Oklahoma these past 5 years.
Did you happen to catch that Burke Magnus podcast by any chance?
I saw it. I know the one you're talking about that he did, but I haven't listened to it yet. No.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious if you had or not. It's interesting stuff for everybody following expansion, but it seems like that's kind of, I guess, cool now. We saw the Big Ten deal. What were your thoughts on the Big Ten deal? Because I don't think we've talked to you since then, and obviously any implications that people want to draw from that. But Kevin Warren did his thing, and now I guess we wait for the next dominoes to fall.
Yeah, I think Paul and I talked about it last week, but I think that for sure that it does seem like we things are slowing down just a little bit here. Certainly now that the Big Ten deal is done, now the Pac-12, rolls up its sleeves and gets going on figuring out where it stands with its negotiations with ESPN and Fox, and is their interest, from Fox there unclear? What kind of offer can they get from ESPN? Will it be kind of a lowball offer that sort of sends them to market here because it's clear George Kliavkoff wants to pursue, Apple and Amazon and these other big streamers out there that might be able to offer some kind of payday. I think on the Big 12 side, Brett Yormark's on the road right now, visiting all these campuses, of course, with the exception of Texas and Oklahoma. And, he's getting around and talking to these administrators and staffers and leaders at these schools. And I'm sure kind of taking notes on where the conference is and where things need to go. But, I'm sure that he will be ready to strike when the moment's right. But I think right now, probably more realistically, it's the Pac-12 trying to hold off a move from the Big Ten here first. I think that's the thing that you've got to worry about if you're George Kliavkoff is just, what are Kevin Warren's intentions? And if we assume he's not done, like how soon would the Pac-12 look into potentially adding West Coast partners for their new addition?
Is Kevin Warren for Kliavkoff like the IRS for most human beings in America?
I've never gotten into an alliance with the IRS. What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's worse.
It's that number. If you get something in the mail, even though it's neutral and just selling, you're like, oh my God, like what the NCAA used to be, right? Kevin Warren is to Kliavkoff. I just. Man,
what kind of business are you up to, Smokey? That the IRS is your existential fear.
God,
what are you doing over there?
Believe me, I just paid for all 87,000 they just hired, I believe, with my last check to them.
No, I'm with you. I think that's and we talked about this at the time, but this is why you didn't see George Kliavkoff taking shots at Kevin Warren in the Big Ten, even though they took his two members, at their media day, because I think you kind of are trying to play nice with them and hoping that. Certainly if the Big Ten, like you're just hoping that the Big Ten is not at that point where they feel like adding California schools or Oregon and Washington adds value to their conference. But it's just hard to know. And that's in the meantime, how in terms of leading the Pac-12, how do you get those schools to stay in the boat and commit long-term in terms of a grant of rights? It's a really kind of tenuous position to be in right now. And I'm sure Phil Knight and lots of folks out there are exploring all their options and trying to figure out where's the fit.
Yeah, I wonder, like you mentioned, not taking shots there. But, I mean, it's not like had he taken a shot that Kevin Warren been like, oh, yeah, really?
Okay, we're taking Stanford.
He's much more calculating than that. I would have taken shots just on the fact that, you kind of tricked me into doing your bidding last year, and then you took away the guts of my conference here. So,
the trust level's pretty low between them right now. I think that's why the alliance is, certainly DOA at this point. But yeah, it's hard for I think all the Pac-12 can do right now is try to figure out how do we get the money right and what kind of offers can we get that would be enticing in the short term for Oregon, Washington, and everybody else to stick together here.
Max, thank you. Anything else, Craig, for Max? Thank you, buddy. Appreciate what you do. It's football season this weekend. We'll have games, evidence, stats, and stuff like that. That's Max Olson, national writer for theathletic.com, with us on Thursdays at 5 o'clock.